All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. We'll be starting in just. We're very pleased to be hosting SoftwareIDM today. I'm Hugh Simpson-Wells with Oxford Computer Group. I've got sitting next to me Peter Sidebotham, who's going to be doing the demoing, and Todd Mollerup sitting opposite me, who's going to chime in with maybe some answers to some questions. What I'm going to do briefly, just for a minute or two, is talk to you about the kind of architectures that we're going to be looking at. Just a reminder of the current on-premises situation with MIM and Identity Panel, and then go on to explain what it is that Peter's going to be talking about. He'll then do his demo, and then we'll probably have a little summary at the end. If you've got any questions, please feel free to type them into the questions dialogue. We probably won't deal with them till the end, although if we spot some that are easily dealt with, we might jump in with those. And if we haven't got time for all of them, we'll get back to you individually about those. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the current state of the art for MIM and Identity Panel. What you've got here is a diagram showing MIM on-premises, synchronizing on-premises applications, provisioning them, and possibly including cloud apps as well, and the MIM portal making self-service, password reset, and other self-service capabilities available to individuals. And because we're sitting on premises in an Active Directory environment, they will be using AD to authenticate. Identity Panel is providing additional services, reporting, health checks, and workflows through its panel service architecture, along with the Identity Panel, which provides the interface. Any users, any admins, presumably typically using that, are going to be authenticating again using AD. But I've also included, for the sake of completeness, because it's just so typical now, a link between AD and Azure AD, and that would be AAD Connect in all likelihood. So that's the state of the art now, but if we now move forward, we can move Identity Panel already into the cloud because Identity Panel is available as a SaaS offering. Now that's a full multi-tenant app service. It's a full Azure service, and that provides exactly the same capability. This diagram only varies by this one idea of the SaaS offering. Plus the fact that any admins are now going to be authenticating using their Azure AD credentials rather than their AD credentials. And we've got an HTTPS link between the two. Of course, the next question is, how do we move the MIM sync to the cloud? And that's the next thing we're going to be talking about. And we're talking here about having a server that's available in the cloud in the first instance, but this is now taken out of your AD infrastructure and made available as a service, as a managed service to you. And the MIM service port is doing all the importing and exporting on behalf of it. So it's talking to the cloud apps, and it's also talking to the on-premises apps that it was talking to before using an HTTPS link, and no inbound links, connections required here to your corporate network. This is outbound only, and using the panel service then to go talk to your other on-premises systems. And a great thing here is that this supports migration of the MIM configuration. So the same MIM configuration that you would have had on premise simply gets moved into the cloud. Actually, there are different MAs, and Peter will probably address that, but apart from there being different types of MAs, everything else is the same. And as long as you've obeyed what we would consider to be good practice, which is, for example, not having rules extensions that do direct calls to systems, but as long as you've stuck to the state-based nature of MIM sync, you'll be able to just straightforwardly migrate that. Also, what you can see here is that this is going to support migration of additional services of your on-premises stuff into the cloud as time goes on. But many of you will not only be using MIM sync, you'll be using the MIM portal for various self-service capabilities and so on. So how do we get that into the cloud as well? Well, I think the answer to that is we don't. what we do is we recognize that, first of all, the self-service password reset capability has already probably migrated to Azure AD for many of us. And what we're doing here is extending the capability of Identity Panel with the Service Panel. And the Service Panel is providing those services which the MIM portal is so valuable for. So, for example, group management, not only the ability to create groups, but also the self-service management of the membership of those groups. And other self-service capabilities, for example, white pages type of applications that the MIM portal has been used for. And of course, workflows. Identity Panel already has its own comprehensive workflow capability. Service Panel leverages that to be able to provide you with the kind of event-driven additions that you might want. The typical one we usually talk about is the code red situation, where you want to quickly disable an account and not wait for the next sync cycle. The next stage in the evolution, and this is a future but not far in the future, is to bring that sync capability into the Identity Panel. And again, what you would expect is the ability to take the current configuration from MIM and use that in the new sync service. Make this as easy as possible, and also support your ECMA2 code as well. And now we're in the position to properly migrate everything, and if we move on to the final slide, we can perhaps eventually say goodbye to all of those on-premises apps and migrate the HR system, your various line of business apps, and of course switch off your on-premises AD. That may be a little further in the future, but we're making sure there's a path to it. Okay, all that intro having been done, and hopefully given you a little bit of a feel for what you're about to see, I'm now going to hand over to Peter, who's going to get straight into demo mode.
All right. So the first thing I want to start with is Identity Panel and some of the capability in there for monitoring your MIM environment and other aspects of your identity environment. So we'll take a look here at an interface called the Time Traveler, and this gives you a picture of identities and accounts across the different repositories in your organization. So if you have MIM, you'll see your metaverse and your different connector spaces. You'll see other systems that are joined into that, like Active Directory. You'll probably have Office 365 in here, maybe different table data sources from Oracle, delimited files. So we can have a single view of all those different data sources. We can also see how these objects change over time. So we can go back to when an object was birthed, and we can step forward and see changes to that object. We can look at individual attributes and see how attributes have been updated over time, and get a history of the account. And this can be done for audit reasons or for troubleshooting, different reasons you might want to know how an account has been adjusted. We also have, through contrails, the ability to see how data flows through the environment. So we can turn this on, and we're actually parsing out your flow rules inside of MIM, and we're taking those flow rules and updating them in context with the timestamp we're looking at. So if we were to look at an older timestamp, we would see the version of the flow rules that match. But the key thing is that we can select any of these attributes and see how they flow through the system. If we're looking at a source attribute, as I am here with HR, I can see how it imports into MIM, and then how it goes to the connector space, to the metaverse, and then I can see all the other connector spaces that it exports out to. So that is allowing us to visualize our data flow for identity management. Another interesting capability with contrails is the ability to do, or with Time Traveler, is the ability to do formatting of data. So here we can apply a view on here to change the Active Directory timestamps to display in a formatted way instead of as a number. We can translate user account control. We can filter which attributes are displayed so that maybe a help desk user isn't overwhelmed with a large quantity of data. So those are some of the things we can do. Moving on, Identity Panel also has a fairly comprehensive reporting facility. So with all of this data that's being collected and time travelability. We can do things like audit reports. So maybe we want to see everyone that has never logged into Active Directory, just as an example. We can point these reports at different data sources. We can generate them to a point in time. So if I'm an auditor and I want to know what did this data set look like at the beginning of the year, I can put it in timestamp and rebuild my report. So some reports, like a last logon or user account control details, things like that are useful for kind of audit and maybe attestation. Other reports might be more useful for data cleanup. So, for example, here I have a report that's going to show me all my proxy address collisions. This can be especially useful if you're using Office 365 for mail, for example. You might have to resolve data conflicts in order to have your email environment provisioned successfully. You can also use this to do things like find users with duplicate accounts and really a wide range of data integrity issues. Other reports that we might have could be operationally oriented. So if I maybe want to do a report on sync errors in the environment, I can scope this for either on a daily basis or by a week or by month, but we can see which accounts we had errors for and how many times those errors occurred. One of the challenges with MIM is you get into a recurring error state, and so now we can address that. Continuing in the vein of operational management, Identity Panel has a built-in scheduler and a built-in health alerting and workflow monitoring as well. So if I, for example, want to run some steps for my Delta cycle, I can do that. I can kick off a schedule, pause it, and then resume it so it continues onward. Looking at some of my options on my scheduling, I can rearrange steps by dragging them around. I can duplicate steps to run additional profiles. You can have steps that span multiple servers. So if you want to, for example, integrate your MIM schedule with your AD Connect schedule so that it goes right from your exports to AD to your sync up to the cloud, you can do that by having a single schedule that spans multiple environments. You can do conditions and thresholds. So one of the challenges that people have is when they run their MIM schedule, if you put a threshold on your management agent inside of MIM, MIM will run up to that threshold every time it executes. So if you have, say, 1,000 deletes waiting to go out, you might be doing 100 deletes every time through your cycle. The conditions in Identity Panel are actually evaluated in advance, so you can detect and halt your schedule before those changes happen, and then email yourself an alert with a report of all the pending changes. So there's a variety of operations and health and risk management tools within Identity Panel. Also, as part of that health monitoring, we have actual health probes, so we can make sure that the services are running, that disk space is available, that databases have been backed up, provisioning is enabled. So one common thing that companies run into is, as part of troubleshooting an account, you may disable provisioning and then forget to turn that back on. So with Identity Panel, we're tracking those types of situations and raising email alerts as needed. So that is kind of a quick summary of Identity Panel and the monitoring and alerting that's going on, the reporting and time traveling. And he talked about how that can be run on-premise and how it's also available today as a SaaS service. Now I want to talk a little bit about how MIM Service Port can extend that functionality and let you move MIM into a cloud environment. So in this example, I have a synchronization service manager that is actually using the Identity Panel MIM Service Port capability. And you see I have some different MAs here that the names the type starts with identity panel. And if I go to create a new MA, and let me just pause my schedule here. And actually, I'll just cancel this out. Okay, so now if I go to create an MA, you can see that I actually have identity panel MA types that match up to my built-in MA types. So when you migrate from an on-premise environment to a SaaS environment, the migration tool simply swaps out the MA types and preserves your existing attribute flow, your provisioning logic, your extension DLLs that you have configured. So you're really running the same MIM configuration. You just have a separate service that's relaying the communications for the management agents. So instead of talking directly to AD, this MA is talking to the identity panel service port capability, which is then relaying those requests to a work queue that is picked up from your on-premise service. So you get the same functionality as the on-premise environment, but now it's a fully managed service in the cloud. So that is a little bit about the MIM service port. Next thing I wanted to talk about is service panel. So how can we replace your white pages environment, your group management, self-service tasks, things of that nature. So Service Panel is a web application that still runs as a SaaS, still available in the cloud. And we manage that through the settings interface within Identity Panel. And one thing that's worth pointing out about these settings, and this covers the Service Panel settings, and also covers all of your Identity Panel configuration and even your management agent configuration for MIM. But any change that you make within Identity Panel and your services, if you maybe change your flow rules or adjust your logic for MIM, all of that is actually getting preserved and giving you a version control history. So this is actually taking every single change and committing it into a Git repository. If, as an enterprise, you actually have kind of an existing investment in version control, either with Team Foundation Services or GitHub or an on-premise solution, you can actually synchronize this identity panel repository in with your enterprise version control system. So this is giving you built-in change control. You can do alerting off of this and receive emails and commit diffs when people make changes. If you have consultants working on your synchronization environments, it can be handy to see what changes they're making and how that change control is handling the dev to stage to prod process. So Service Panel, like I said, it's configured through the Identity Panel settings. And just to show how this works, I'm going to make a few styling changes so you can see how this might be customized for a corporate look and feel. So I'm just going to grab a new color here and change it to a different theme and maybe change the application title. And let's upload a new logo. All right, so unlike the MIM portal, I'm not going to have to go do an IIS reset, so that's convenient. I can just hit refresh. And now I have my new styling set up. Now, this is showing the basic styling that's available right through the web interface. We also allow more advanced styling through a standardized style sheet. So if you have web developers in your organization that are experienced with kind of your standard styling frameworks, it's very easy for them to make more in-depth customizations to the look and feel. So just to show you a couple things, let's start with kind of a general white pages capability. So I'm just going to do an overall search and maybe sort by title and expand one of my users here. So we can customize the layout of this page. We can put thumbnail images on. We can use different icons to customize the look and feel. You can, of course, search by specific attributes, and we have role and attribute level security on all of this. So as I am logged in as an administrator, I can see quite a few details like employee ID and account information. We can trigger update actions off of this. So this is now getting into some of the self-service and administrative capability. So if I want to disable this account, for example, I can trigger my code red form, confirm that I want to do a disablement, submit this form, and now I have, so a couple things have happened. I'm going to actually go to my dashboard here and show you in a second. Let me bring up ADUC. All right, and I have triggered a workflow here to disable the account. So let's see. So this workflow appears not to have done what I expected. So this is actually an interesting opportunity to show some of the troubleshooting capabilities. We actually have the ability to have reporting right here within Identity Panel on all of the request actions. So we can actually see here exactly what data we tried to submit, and we can see that it was actually the action against AD. Possibly I have a permissions issue with my service account, something like that. What this is showing, though, aside from the permission issue, is that we can have actions triggered from Service Panel immediately so that we don't have to go through a delayed synchronization process. Looking at an earlier request where I actually created an account, we can see that this executed an action to create the account directly in AD, and then we followed that up with synchronization to finish populating the account. So this can be useful when you have things like user enablement and disablements, or requests to join groups, or maybe modify mailbox size, where you might have users complain if you have to go through a protracted sync process to have those take effect. Looking at another example, I can do kind of on an administrative perspective, maybe create a new account. So we have a range of different form options. We can put constraints on lengths of fields, make fields required or not. We can do masking of data and things like that. Drop-down lists can be populated either from static lists or various types of queries. We can also do drop-downs for reference attributes like searching for users. And let's just pick a manager and title here. One thing that's kind of interesting that you can do very easily that's quite challenging to do with the MIM portal is date range validation. So because I'm creating this user as a contractor, I want to make sure that they're going to be created no more than They start no more than 2 weeks from now and are terminated no more than a year from now. We can also, as kind of an interesting feature, we can save forms for later. So if we have maybe a help desk worker that's fulfilling a ticket and there's some missing data, they can actually save the current state of the form and actually return to it at a later point to finish where they left off. And then there's a dashboard module that they can have to list all of their current partially completed forms. And then finally, an interesting capability of Service Panel and the MIM service port is it has built-in unique value generation. So we can get our contractor ID, generate a presumptive account name, and calculate an initial password so that the service desk can start maybe setting up their laptop resource and things like that. So all of these capabilities of Service Panel are available today. Customers have already implemented this and have it in wide use. MIM Service Port is currently available to our existing customers, and we have people that are rolling that out. We're targeting wide availability of MIM Service Ports for July of this year. Do you have any questions for me to cover?
And then Peter, you're going to mention, are we going to cover the sync engine inside of the Identity Panel at this point, or is it coming up?
So Sync Engine in Identity Panel is coming up for next year, and that is actually going to be a Sync Engine fully configured through Identity Panel, and instead of having to move that configuration over to MIM, it actually executes within Identity Panel as a single hosted service.
And a question, if you already have the MIM portal and you want to put it in the cloud as part of this, can you do it?
Yes, so you can put the MIM portal in the cloud as part of this moving MIM into a hosted service. And because the portal is normally tied to Active Directory to authentication, instead of trying to synchronize all of those users and object SIDs and then having VPN for authentication and having all of that complexity, the model is to move the portal and just have accounts in the portal that are not tied to Active Directory, and then use Service Panel to front end the portal. So Service Panel becomes your user interface for interacting with the MIM portal, and you get all of the benefits of the Azure authentication, the mobile device friendly interface, and things like that. But you still have your existing investment in workflows and permissions and so forth from the MIM portal. All of that is happening under the covers.
Another question, is there any integration with ServiceNow?
Yes, so Service Panel, actually part of the inspiration for the name is integration with ServiceNow. A lot of people find it challenging to directly automate tickets in ServiceNow for identity requests. Oftentimes it's because the ServiceNow workflow engine does not easily tie into the MIM portal. So ServiceNow is able to sit between them and really provide the translation layer. So we have one customer that's using... Yeah, Service Panel sits in the middle. So we have one customer, for example, that is automating 3,000 requests per month, where before they had a help desk user would manually read the form and then fulfill it using the MIM portal. Now Service Panel is automatically picking up those requests and posting them to the portal.
I got a few questions coming in. So one says, are RCDCs eliminated? This is from Tom Hockman. I think I can answer that myself, which is yes. But the supplementary question is, how are workflows, MPRs, and sets managed? And maybe I wonder whether you could show what a workflow looks like to perhaps contrast with the MPR set approach in the portal.
Yes. So workflows are managed through the provider section in Identity Panel. So if I have here a Service Panel workflow for like my code red action, I'm detecting first that the request type is that it's a code red form request from Service Panel. And we have, for these trigger rules that say whether to evaluate the workflow, we have a built-in Visual Studio Code module that gives you IntelliSense and auto-completion and things like that. And then we have a list of actions that this is going to take. So in the first case, we're emailing the user's manager, letting them know that the account's disabled. Next, we're executing a fixture to disable the AD user account. And then we're disabling them in the contractor feed if they're a contractor, disabling them in HR if they're an associate, and then queuing up the Delta schedule. So all of this is configured through the identity panel settings interface.
Okay. Also from Tom, is SCSM reporting still needed or built into identity panel? Again, I think I know the answer, but I'll let you.
Probably good to compare those two.
Yes. So all of the reporting within identity panel is integrated. Identity panel has its own big data store. It runs on MongoDB. And the reporting engine in identity panel is fully integrated into the web application. There's no separate components. So you can download report definitions off of our knowledge base and upload those into your own environment. You can customize them. You can make your own fully custom reports. And then you can publish those reports to whatever security roles are appropriate for your environment. Those reports can be downloaded as a variety of formats. They can be downloaded on a schedule. They can be emailed. They can be triggered with workflow events. You can also use them to syndicate data into other systems. So if you're using a SIEM environment that you want to send identity data to, you can do that. The key thing is that you don't have a bunch of different servers that you have to set up. So one of the challenges with SCSM is you have to have not only the MIM portal, but you have to have a data warehouse, you have to have an SCSM management server, and then you have to do a lot of fairly advanced customization if you want to get anything other than the non-default portal data included in those reports.
Sure.
With SaaS, you just get it.
And you've got access to all that historical data as well.
That's right.
Okay. Tom's been keeping us pretty busy with his typing. Is Identity Panel in the cloud something bundled with M365 license or separate? Well, I know that that's separate. It's not a Microsoft product. It's not part of that bundle. Brett Bentley says
there's one exception that the MIM server licenses, if you're using the portal, we actually are having it where when we scan your AD environment, we make sure you have the right licenses. So you're covered from the license perspective from the portal.
So for MIM, but for the rest of it, yeah.
Right.
Okay, and then provisioning from Workday, what would be the approach to that?
So provisioning from Workday, you would have your, so with MIM in the cloud, you would just have your Workday management agent. So it'll read from Workday on the REST API and then publish that to Identity Panel as just as a regular management agent feed. So the same, really the same provisioning process that you would use today, just hosted in a different location.
It might be good to mention that we're working on releasing, we have an initiative to release 300 connectors or providers, which would all be supported therefore by MIM. So Workday, ServiceNow, Anaplan, all these SaaS applications.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that one benefit of this MIM service port is that any management agent that goes through this cycle is going to automatically support deltas. So some people have an issue where they might have management agents that only support full imports, and that can cause performance problems for them. By putting that management agent in a MIM service port, you can eliminate that sticking point in your schedule.
So Brett would just like clarification that is Workday supported now, today?
Yes, it is.
Couldn't be clearer. Good. So MIM in the cloud no longer uses SharePoint underneath. Correct, because SharePoint was only there to support the portal, and we're eliminating the portal.
That's right. The only way you would have SharePoint would be if you wanted to run a standalone MIM portal instance in the cloud with behind-the-scenes access for administrators. So you might have SharePoint on a VM in the cloud to give portal access to some administrators. For your general kind of end-user base, they would be going strictly through Service Panel with no SharePoint involved.
Yep. Okay.
Question, can you configure and program MIM using Identity Panel, or do you have to go to your traditional Visual Studio and RDP methods?
You do not have to do that. So RDP access to the MIM box in the cloud is available for those that really want to get into things with the Synchronization Service Manager. But the standard way to manage your MIM configuration will actually be through the identity panel interface, and then you'll be able to publish those changes to the synchronization service.
And what about writing code?
So you can keep all of your existing code in C# if you or Visual Basic, so you still have the ability to have all those rules extensions. But with Identity Panel, you also have the ability to have the rule engine and PowerShell for configuring rules. So you can create flow rules in a rule engine expression language. It's really a superset of the portal flow rule language. If you've used the MIM portal for flow rules, this is a superset of that capability. You also have the ability to write flow rules in PowerShell. And that was a priority for us because a lot of organizations have a lot of internal PowerShell expertise, maybe with more people than they have who are like full-on .NET developers.
And then testing. Do you have a way where you can test your code and value it and test cases?
Yes. So Identity Panel has, as part of this development tooling for MIM, a complete automated regression testing solution where you can create fixtures that will modify your environment, maybe set up HR records, terminate accounts, things like that. Then you can synchronize, flow the changes through your MIM environment, and then you can have automated assertions that check the results of synchronization, that things are as expected.
So Tom Hockman is continuing to keep us honest. So can admins do all the same things in Identity Panel, Identity and Service Panel, as in the portal? Which I think is a relatively complicated answer coming up.
Yes, so it is a complicated answer. You can create this, so you can expose the same functionality to admins, but you do have to configure the management forms for that. So if the portal has a little bit simpler to configure management interface out of the box in terms of you can go hack on users and groups, and you don't have a lot to set up with that. You can set up forms and service panels to do all those actions, but it is something that has to be configured.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm just thinking that a lot of the admin functions are no longer relevant. So obviously you're not doing RCDCs, you're doing workflows in a completely different way.
Yes, and
you're not creating synchronization rules because you would only use classic flow. Is that classic rules? Is that correct?
Classic rules and uplift.
Yes.
So a lot, that's right. A lot of those management functions are going to be replaced by admin access to the Identity Panel settings interface.
Yeah.
And one thing that you will be avoiding across the board is having to dig into config files and XML and things like that. It really is all done through the UI.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's a question which is relevant to everybody. Will a link to this presentation be available so I can share with my co-workers? Yes, we're recording this, and we will make the recording available to everybody that's registered.
So we talked about the sync engine in the cloud. You can use the portal and have it fronted by Service Panel, or you can use Service Panel's replacement or a hybrid of both. What about what's coming after the sync engine? Can you talk a little bit about the sync engine as a service as part of Identity Panel? Can you program it in C#? How does that work?
Sure. So the sync engine as a service so obviously running inside of Identity Panel, that gives you some benefits over the MIM sync engine, chiefly being performance improvements. Also, there's the fact that it's a true multi-tenant SaaS application running in Azure App Services, so you don't have VMs behind the scenes that need to be managed. Another benefit of that sync as a service is the ability to select rules to happen in an event-based fashion. So you might have the bulk of your environment is state-based, but you might have individual actions like provisioning or specific attribute flows that you want to flush through the system immediately.
How does the MIM as a service, where you actually have a VM behind it running MIM that you just talked about, versus this next gen after this, where it's the sync engine, is part of Identity Panel? What does that look like from a performance perspective?
So from a performance perspective, it's really going to be a night and day difference, because Identity Panel uses really a database infrastructure that is really designed for schemaless data, which really describes identities, because you can have an arbitrary attributes. There's the question of attribute history and keeping track of things from an audit perspective, and MIM's efforts to deal with that really hamper it in performance. MIM was written in a day when everything was single-threaded, and that has continued to be the case in MIM, whereas Identity Panel, it was really started after the introduction of the WebH and some of these big data technologies and techniques for massive multi-threading. And so we expect the sync engine in Identity Panel to be 2 orders of magnitude faster than MIM sync engine.
So I've got a poll I'd like to put up just to let people give us a little bit of feedback about additional information they might want. I'd be grateful if people would respond to the poll. And we're coming up to the end of our 45 minutes. Perhaps we could just put the last couple of slides up. So, okay, so I see people are filling in the poll. Thank you very much. Yeah, please, no obligation to vote, but please do. So, I mean, in summary, we've talked about the Identity Panel. What the demo we had started off with Identity Panel because we had to assume that some of you may not have seen it before. And there it is. It's there to support MIM, provides reporting, health checks, workflows, additional connectivity, and so on. You can have it. It's available on premises, available and working, in many environments on premises or as a SaaS offering. We then looked at the MIM server in the cloud, detached from your AD, and we said that you could migrate your existing MIM configuration. Peter just talked about the potential performance improvements as well. You then got this single HTTPS connectivity, no inbound connections to your corporate environment. And as I say, support to migration. And then we talked about the future plan for MIM, the MIM sync service provided by Identity Panel. I think what I've missed from my summary there was talk about the service panel and the self-service capabilities and so on. But I think we covered that pretty well. And thank you everybody for the questions, which brought out a lot of other issues. So in terms of what next, if you want more information on what Peter's been talking about, please go to support.identitypanel.com. There's a couple of locations there you can go to for interactive demos, one on the Identity Panel, one on the Service Panel. And actually you can sign up for a full trial by clicking sign up at one of those locations. If you want to know more about Oxford Computer Group's consulting services, either visit Oxford Computer Group, or in the UK it's thirdspace.net, our sister company. And if you want more information about our training services, please visit oxfordcomputertraining.com. And those are our personal emails for you if you want to get in touch with further questions or to engage with us in any way.
Might be worth mentioning too that you have a complete set of courses on Identity Panel.
Yeah, should you go ahead with it, we'll be there to support you with training courses, comprehensive training courses. So that pretty neatly brings us up to the end of the time. If you've got any more questions, please do type them in, but we actually managed to cover them all on this occasion. We'll be sending out a link to the video of this, to the recording. So enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are, and thanks very much for joining us today.